I kind of kept up with it with my other activities, but now I'm really glad that I did. I'm certainly glad I got to talk to these people.
Great. Now, hey, Chad, we got to go on break. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. I'm going to put you on hold. James, you might want to hang on and put your thing on hold for a while. And when we come back, can you share some of these stories that these people have told you before we get into all your stuff?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. Again, don't hang up. I'm just going to put you on hold there, Chad. So we'll be back in 2.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. This is Gary.
I gaze upon the annals of time, one thing that comes through: we are not alone in this universe. It's a thought that rings true. Ancient cave dwellers drew spacecraft on the walls. It's a recurring theme. I've seen the same thing while walking late at night, and I know it's not a dream.
From Maelstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance and deceive.
Tell the truth, they will ridicule everything you say and do. It's all part of a deception. It's a puppet master's tool. And I've seen those craft shut down the silos from 10 miles away. And there ain't nothing that the Pentagon can do. They can't make them go away.
From Maelstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance and deceive. From Maelstrom to Manhattan, New York to LA, you can't get the picture if they're pale or they're gray. But what we have seen might not be what it seems when the government's shadows dance and deceive.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. And thank you.
Your Saturday, paranormal psychic and ghost hunter.
I did it wrong again. I hit the wrong button. Boy, I need new glasses or something. Hang
You're
on.
listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, not the best, especially after that blow. That was a good one. Hey, James and Chad, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to take that off off the computer screen. It's right next to the other bumper music I push, and I hit your Saturday show button. I'm sorry.
I can't hear it from my line, but I believe you.
Okay, yeah. Did you hear it, Chad?
I did. But I did hear. But hey, you know what? Give yourself a break. When I was announced I was going to be on your show, Gary, I put out I'm going to be on My Streams, and I looked. I said, "Oh my gosh!" I wrote down My Streams. They said, "No, it's Nice Dreams." And we talk about needing glasses. I'm a candidate. I didn't have my cheaters on, and I typed in My Streams. So So a lot of people out there for about 3 hours caught that, that were following me around. We're looking for a show called My Streams.
Oh, wow.
Anyway.
But getting into some of these stories that people, told you about, of encounters or whatever, anything interesting that just kind of pops in your head?
Well, Bruce, there's a ton of them. Bruce Caffey, he was a pilot, and his contact was, he was flying between New Zealand and Australia, and literally had the mothership of all mothership, sit there and track him for literally 50 miles, and it literally it blew his noodle. He said, he talked to me. He says, and I get this a lot when people experience this. He just told me, he says, I was a stuttering idiot for a long time afterwards, but I don't know, if I were flying an airplane and I had this mothership about 3 football fields large tracking me, for that length of time, I think I would have a problem too. And so that kind of actually started his whole, process of really looking at researching. He was a military guy, and then of course he went on and he wrote several really great books. Specifically harmonic. Trying to figure out what the last 3 digits were. But anyways. The point is, he sent me his rough draft. I got a copy of that rough harmonic. What is that thing? Anyways, my memory's going bad. But I've got a copy, and it was a partially handwritten book that he had not yet that he was going to go into publishing, and a lot of it had, in the old days, what they would do is he would it actually tape and put little tapes with typing on it, or make little notes. So I guess I got one of the originals from him in my hands as far as the whole thing. It was really interesting, by far higher than my own pay grade, and I consider myself a scientist in many respects too. But that would be interesting as far as that goes. Gabriel Green had many sighting experiences out of Giant Rock, like so many people have. I mean, for some reason, Giant Rock is a vortex of UFO activity. And a small little thing. My mother was, she was not particularly a huge fan of my Uncle George for a lot of reasons, but and so she would say, Fewy, there's no such thing as well, we were living out there, and my sister and my mother, we were walking out at night, and we got buzzed by a low-flying UFO saucer with lights on, and from that day in time, she never said another bad thing against my uncle. Anyway, the point is, sometimes seeing's believing, huh?
Well, it sure would make a difference. I mean, I could, let's face it, back when I first started broadcasting, Chad, when you talked about UFOs, we're talking about in the 70s. People would look at you like, oh, wow, what mental institution did this guy get out of? And I could see your mother, figuring, hey, your uncle, maybe something's wrong with him. And I could see that. But then once you see it yourself, it opens your eyes. But then you got the problem that your uncle had with other people.
Sure. And what are you going to say? And really, One thing, if you ever see him on television or on radio, how he would deal with skeptics, he was just a matter of fact. He couldn't get rattled. And the same thing with me. I've had people ask me if I've ever been to a psychiatrist and what have you. Even this over the last 5 years, and my answer is no. I haven't, and it's just the way it is, and you kind of stick by your convictions, but it gets a little uncomfortable because you're actually, well, gee, what would prompt a person to actually think this? And the other thing too is, and this is, people have been contacted are generally reluctant. It's not like they stand on a soapbox. It takes a lot to get people to share their stories. It's not like a particularly easy thing. I had actually, I'm of course I've done some film and been involved with some entertainment people, And one of this young lady, actually there were 4 of them that were in the entertainment business, and they were living in Venice and working in Hollywood. And they used to go out to Giant Rock, which is about 100 miles, from LA, etc. And they would go out there and, camp out and just, unwind. And this one young lady, she had an experience, and, out there, she was actually abducted. There was actually her and 5 other people, and they actually saw the ship, and she ran up the ship, and they actually took her away for a while. There's a huge time lapse, and then they brought her back and dropped her off. Well, I was getting witness testimony, via video, and I wanted to get her on film, and so I'm sitting there talking to her for about a week, and she's sharing, 4 or 5 different times, and I'm talking to her. I said, well, I need to get you on film on this, and eventually she just disappeared. She simply just did not want to go any further with it, but very, very credible, at least over the phone. And one of the guys who actually was on my crew was one of the witnesses out there, and so that's how I actually got in touch with her. And so, but yeah, she just didn't want any kind of. She wanted to kind of lay low because she'd had such a difficult time, for years afterwards. So a lot of these people they're like, and I think that people who come out and share their story, most of them are pretty much like a thematic or a theme of my various characters, and they're really reluctant heroes. They really don't want to have anybody notice them. They want to go about their business, and they want to be incognito, and which segues into me too, because I was the same way. I literally I didn't tell my wife because until about 2 years after we were married that I had actually had a UFO abduction experience. It was 2 years after. I mean, it wasn't something I wanted to tell her before because I wanted her to marry me.
It could have made a difference, that, Chad. You might have not been married to her if you had told her.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, so consequently, she of course, she understood, she believed me, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't go around saying this. In fact, a wonderful little story I had is I was drinking a few beers and with some of my buddies. This is when I was about 17 years old, and my uncle comes on the television, and we're all sitting around drinking beers, and my friends are going, "Oh wow, that guy! Well, what a trip!" And just like, "Wow, amazing!" La la la. And I'm sitting there like a bump in the lot. I'm like, "Yeah, he's a pretty neat guy." And so, because I literally didn't want to, I didn't want to bring up the subject because at the time I was, in part, I was a little, I guess embarrassed, but really just I didn't want anyone to know that I was actually living amongst this, really gigantic extended UFO family out there. And it was like something I didn't want to share with them because I would think that, how young men can be as far as that, and it may get around it. And of course, it was something I just didn't want to deal with. So I went through most of my life not really doing anything, saying anything with that up until. But again, the experiences continued. The chance encounters with people all over the world that knew my uncle, and it was almost like. It was almost like I had a sign on my head and on the back of my head saying, UFO contactee, because invariably I would, when the subject would come up, I would be having a conversation, and this would be in some really interesting circles, like a bunch of scientists, rocket scientists at Morton Thiokol. We actually made a presentation to them to get them. We were doing remote sensing in the desert, and we were doing some satellite imagery, and so we went and made a presentation to Morton Thiokol to do a kind of a joint venture. I wanted to get them some dollars in with it, so we had to make this presentation. And so this one guy kept on looking at me, and the scientist with a really extraordinary, big hair, really, I mean, if you were to pick a scientist, this guy was it. And he kept on looking at me. He says, and he kept on saying, and he kept on writing